The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is the prequel to the now iconic film and novel franchise, and is the story of Coriolanus Snow's rise to power as he becomes the mentor to District 12's female tribute in the 10th annual Hunger Games. To be honest, I don't really read a ton of novels, but oddly enough, when the movies were coming out, I actually did read the Hunger Games books as the films came out, and it was a really cool experience. And even though, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not the biggest Hunger Games fan, either the books or the movies, and even though they're not bad at all, I don't really think they're anything groundbreaking. I still enjoyed them as they were. Although despite that, I actually didn't read the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes book, which made my anticipation for this movie kind of feel all over the place. On the one hand, this is a universe that I know and really like, but on the other hand, the trailers for this movie focused a lot on the romance aspect of this film, which, going into it, I could easily see being a big hit or a big miss. And for this movie as a whole, I actually do really like it. Despite this film having a ton of flaws, I actually do think this is a good return to form for the franchise. And I think by far the best part about this movie, just like the best part about the Hunger Games franchise as a whole, is the talk of strategies and politics in this film. With this film taking place in the Hunger Games' infancy, it's very interesting to see how all of the characters, whether they're district or capital, have their own distinct thoughts and feelings about the Hunger Games. Whether they have their own interesting reasons why they believe it's good, whether they have their own obvious reasons why they think it's bad, or whether they have their own complex reasons why they're sort of conflicted on the argument, that's where the movie is at its best with its writing and its character work. And speaking of the characters, let's talk about Coriolanus in this movie, because I do feel like this is where a lot of people, especially critics, are going to hate on the movie, saying that Coriolanus is sort of a bland character. And even though sometimes I can see that, I honestly think his character is very realistic. He doesn't really go through this grand change throughout the film. He just sort of matures from this young boy who is clever but is still very naive to the world around him to this hardened man who is very power hungry and knows exactly how to get it now. You see the wheels turn in his head, you see his empathy and strategy conflict with each other, and it just makes for some of the most interesting character moments. I also really like the chemistry that Blythe and Zegler have in this movie, even though the way that their romance is written isn't the best at times. The way that they act is very believable in their connection with each other. The music is really good and feels very cinematic and bombastic, and the cinematography is also just as good. There are a lot of great shots of the Capitol, and my God, when the Hunger Games starts in this movie, there is a fantastic long tracking shot following Zegler's character that truly does make you feel just all of the anxiety that she is feeling right now, and she has no idea where to turn because there's just death and destruction all around her, and it's a fantastic scene. The cinematography in this film definitely learned a lot from the shaky, quick-cut action of the first Hunger Games film. And there are overall a ton of moments where all of those elements really do combine to create a really good, really solid product. With that said, however, this is a very flawed movie. The biggest flaw that I can honestly find with the film is that it didn't feel like I watched one movie. It felt like I watched two movies crammed together, and it just made for a very bloated experience. There's a lot that this movie has to cram together in terms of character and story, and it really does create the majority of the film's problems. The first half of the movie definitely felt very rushed. It was very interesting to see the behind the scenes of the Hunger Games, but at the same time, I would have liked to have seen way more development when it comes to the tributes. There is a great scene where one of the tributes, I'm pretty sure his name was Reaper, has this great sort of ceremony in front of the cameras during the Hunger Games defacing the Capitol, and it is a really powerful scene. But at the same time, I only really half cared because I didn't know Reaper. There are a lot of moments like that in the first half of this movie, where each of the tributes have their own moments to shine, but at the same time, they have no development, so you don't really care all that much. And the second half of the movie is essentially the exact opposite problem. It feels way too slow. The story of Coriolanus' rise to power in these moments is always very interesting, but what always stops the movie in its tracks in terms of pacing is the romance of the film, which I was so worried about going in. Again, the chemistry between the two actors, it's fine. It's just that the romance sort of feels like a stop, a roadblock in Coriolanus' journey, which I think they're going for, but at the same time, it always brings the pacing to a halt. And I feel like the choppy editing throughout the whole film is the reason why this movie feels so crammed together. And going back to my earlier issue, despite how interesting I found some of the characters in this film, I didn't really care all that much about most of them, if not all of them. When it came to the home life of a lot of the main characters, especially Coriolanus and Lucy Gray in this film, man, I did not care. I didn't care about Coriolanus' grandmother or his cousin. I didn't care about Lucy Gray's ex-boyfriend or his current girlfriend. Literally, the only person I even slightly cared about in this entire film was this one guy from the districts whose father was so rich that he became part of the capital. He has by far some of the most interesting character moments and has one scene that sent shivers down my spine. So yeah, there are definite flaws in the movie, but overall, I would be lying if I said that I wasn't really surprised by it. The story is compelling, the characters are interesting enough, the acting is great, and the cinematography and music are fantastic. But the characters needed better development, the story was crammed, the pacing was all over the place, and the editing was very choppy. There have been so many disappointing movies that came out over the past couple months, so to have a surprising movie that's not great, but is good, is a thumbs up in my book. I'm gonna give The Hunger Games: A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes a B. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are the best. And don't forget to click subscribe and click that bell icon down below to stay up to date on all things movie, all things TV, all things nerd.